Hey there, my name is Terry with True Marie Soapworks, and I'm going to show you how I made this soap. I filmed this a while back, and I made a tutorial for Elements Bath & Body, who no longer exists. The tutorial I can still find, so I will place a link in the description below. At the time I videoed it, and we just pulled the stills from my video, so I have been meaning to turn this into a video for you all, and I'm just now getting to it, so I hope you enjoy. This design is very interesting because it kind of boggles the mind on how you can get such a nice thin straight stripe. Some of the bars are even very unique that they come out to have the inverse on the opposite side. The design is really pretty easy and straightforward. It's the Taiwan swirl and it's cut differently. I will be sharing tips throughout the video though. This is the one batch that came out the best for me in all of the tries that I've had at this design. So I will be sharing tips throughout the video, so please stay with me and let's get started. To start off, I'm using 1/3 to 1/2 of the water weight in distilled water ice cubes. Then I top off the remaining water weight with distilled water. Next, I'm adding 1 teaspoon per pound of oils of powdered sugar to the water and dissolving that completely. Adding sugar in soap, whether it's regular sugar, powdered sugar, or sorbitol, helps the lather. But in some cases, it also slows acceleration that is caused by the fragrance. I say in some cases because I've had it work very well for some fragrances that are not well behaved, but in other cases, I don't notice a difference. And I would say with this batch, I didn't really notice a difference. But regardless, it does add to the lather, so that's a little bonus. If you're new to soap making, it's important to understand and follow all the safety precautions when dealing with lye. This is sodium hydroxide. Another type of lye is potassium hydroxide. These are used to make soap. Soap can't be made without lye. Melt and pour is already made with lye and then you melt it, so you won't have to deal with lye. But if you're making this type of soap, you have to make it with lye. For more information on Lye Safety, check the description below. Next, I add the sodium hydroxide to the water and I stir that immediately. I'm making sure that it doesn't form a crust on the bottom of the pitcher. If it forms a crust, it's very difficult to break up. So that's more important than getting all of the lye out of the bowl initially. And once I'm comfortable that everything is beginning to dissolve, I add the remaining sodium hydroxide that's stuck to the bowl. Then when all that's dissolved, I move it to a well-ventilated area that's free from any kids or pets. Next, I measure the sodium lactate. I like sodium lactate because it makes the bar harder, which makes it last longer. It also helps the soap release from the mold a little more cleanly. Sodium lactate is a natural ingredient. It's a liquid salt, which is a humectant, but it doesn't really help moisturize your skin because it's not on your skin long enough to make a difference. Next, I measure the hard oils, starting with the sustainable palm oil, and then I measure the coconut oil. And I microwave them very gently in 30-second intervals until they are completely melted. In the meantime, I measure the liquid oils, starting with the avocado oil, then the castor oil, and finally the olive oil. Next, I measured the fragrance right into the liquid oils. It's important to use a slow-moving fragrance for this design because you need time to work. Now it's time to prepare the colorants. First, for the black, I'm using activated charcoal, and that is from coconut carbon. And I'm mixing it at a rate of 1.5 teaspoons per pound of soap, and that is for 1/3 of the batter. With activated charcoal and titanium dioxide, I hydrate that with olive oil, and I use a ratio of 1 part colorant to 3 parts olive oil. With other colorants, I don't tend to use that much olive oil. I only hydrate it until it is fluid but not gloppy. But with activated charcoal and titanium dioxide, they can accelerate a little bit, so I use that full 1:3 ratio. Here I'm measuring the titanium dioxide, and I have already pre-dispersed that at that ratio of 1:3 parts colorant to olive oil. And for this, I'm using 1 teaspoon per pound of oils. The neon purple is also used at a rate of 1 teaspoon per pound of oils for 1/3 of the batter. I want you to take a look at this activated charcoal, see what's happening. It kind of gets a little bubbly, and those bubbles all need to dissipate before you use them in soap, or you will get little bubbles in your design. So it's good to mix that up ahead of time and give those little bubbles time to dissipate. Now that the palm oil and coconut oil are melted, I add the cocoa butter. I stir that and I melt it in the microwave until it's just barely melted but completely melted. When that's melted, I add the liquid oils to the melted hard oils. Next, I add the sodium lactate to the cooled lye solution. After that, I strain the lye solution into the oil solution. Now to find out what a third of this batter is, I am going to weigh the bowl and the contents. Then I subtract the weight of the bowl to get the contents weight, and then from there I divide by 3. Once I have that figured out, I stick blend until an emulsion is reached, and then I split the batter off and color it. Once the colorant is mixed in thoroughly, I wait till my batter is at the proper trace. Here, the reason why I think this one was my favorite of all of the stripe swirls that I've tried is because the batter was a little thicker than it had been in the previous examples that I did. The batter needs to be at an almost medium trace, I would say. Not quite medium, but not watery. Here I have the mold prepared with the dividers. You can purchase dividers or you can make your own. Here I've made my own, and I do have a video on that if you're interested in how I did it. Next, I pour the batter into the mold. I'm very careful to hold down the dividers and make sure they make contact with the silicone mold. I'm just pouring enough to seal off the bottom. And then once the bottom is kind of sealed off and the compartments won't be so apt to ooze into each other, then I can pour the remaining batter into each of the compartments. At this point, I have to work pretty quickly to get that batter into the mold. It's starting to thicken up, but again, I feel that it was at the right trace when I did the swirl. Here is a time when I wouldn't necessarily get every last drop out of the containers because it just takes too long. Once the batter is in the mold, I run a skewer through each of the compartments to kind of loosen up the batter, and then I remove the dividers. The tool I used to swirl this design is called a skinny stick. I think it really helped the design. The reason why is that it's a flat tool with a squared off bottom instead of a rounded bottom like a popsicle stick. So it has more contact with the bottom, and therefore the stripes will go down further than with a popsicle stick. When I swirl, I try to be as uniform as possible, and I try to hold the stick as close to 90-degree angles as possible, and that really causes it to have some drag. That's all there is to the swirl. I just clean up the mold a little bit and let it set until it is no longer shiny, the surface is a little bit dull, and then I cover it and oven process it. I was able to cut this batch the next day. This batch makes 9 bars, and basically you're cutting it into thirds in one direction and then turning it 90 degrees and cutting it in thirds in the other direction. Take a look at this diagram to see how the cuts are made. I marked this soap ahead of time so I knew where to make my divisions. I used that slant ruler trick to divide the divisions into equal parts. If you haven't watched that video, it's worth a watch to easily divide your soap into whatever divisions you want to and not have to do a bunch of math or divide in a bunch of fractions or decimals. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I hope you learned something. And if you would do me a favor and subscribe and hit the bell for notifications, then you can catch my next video. I want to say a huge thank you to those of you who support me by buying my soap and buying my recipes. I recently added a new recipe. I've had a lot of people ask about the marble soap making video and the recipe for that, and I have simplified it a bit and made it actually a lot easier for the same result. So I have posted that recipe, and if you're one of the ones that were waiting for that, please take a look at my shop. And here are some examples of the soap that I made recently with that recipe. I have a Facebook group if you're interested. It's for learning and sharing and inspiration and encouraging each other on our soap making journey wherever we are. It's a private group. If you'd like to join, just answer the questions and you have to agree to the group rules. The link is in the description below. I get a lot of questions about some of the supplies that I use, some of the equipment, like my stick blender. I get that a lot. I get questions on, say, my scale, or the pitchers that I use, or the glass bowls that I use. I finally put together an Amazon storefront that has all those supplies and equipment that you see in the video you can buy. It's something that I wish I had when I was starting out. If I watch a video, I can say, hey, that looks like it works pretty good. I want to get the same thing. The price of the items are not increased at all for you. It costs you the same as if you would just buy it on Amazon normally, but here you have everything all in one place and I earn a small commission, so check it out if you're interested. Also, I have some discount codes for you if you're interested. I have one for custom craft tools. I had a little input on the design for the custom craft tools cutter that cuts horizontally and vertically, and I just love it. Of course, I didn't use it in this video because this is an older video, but that's all I use now. It has taken the place of several of my cutters. I have a review on it in one of my videos, and I'll link that below. Another discount code that I have for you is for replica surfaces. I have been loving their surfaces. It makes my product photos look more professional, so I would recommend them, and I have an awesome discount code for you from them. So check out the description for those details as well. Here are some examples of the photos I took using replica surfaces. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I will see you back here next time.